Alright, good morning, boys and girls. Make sure you are on page 65 of the Purple Book. We're going to be reading our electronic devices good for us. In this story, we're going to be focusing on the author's claim. I want you to make sure you have your Purple Book, your writing notebook, a pen or a pencil, and a highlighter before we begin. I also want you to know that you can pause this video at any time in order to make sure you are keeping up with the information. Okay, so we're going to start with author's claim. That is the skill of this week. An author's claim is an opinion. I'm going to go ahead and write that definition. An opinion or belief the author has and is supported by facts. Okay, so here we have our first heading, which is plugged in, and below the heading we have a sentence that reads, kids need to spend time using electronic devices. So as we read, I want you to go ahead and start thinking about what is the author's claim about electronic devices. And we're going to start looking at how the author supported their claim in this section with the facts. Kids need to spend time using electronic devices. Do you love to surf the internet, listen to music, text, and talk on a cell phone? You are not alone. A recent study has some surprising news. Kids in the United States between the ages of 8 and 18 spend 7.5 hours a day on electronic devices. These include computers, smartphones, and video games. Some adults try to advance the idea that these devices waste kids' time. However, some research survey says this idea is inaccurate. In fact, the data shows that technology can benefit kids. So we're going to go ahead and do a stop and think here. And I want you to think about what is the author telling us about electronic devices. So just based on the title, we can tell that they want kids to use electronic devices. So right here, I believe this is the author's claim for this section. I'm going to go ahead and label it, and at the end of the text I am going to come back to it to see if really that is what the author is claiming to believe about electronic devices. In this paragraph, the author starts out by asking us if we like to use electronic devices, such as things that you do on them, such as surfing the internet, listening to music, and talking on the cell phone. Then the author started talking about a study. When authors do this, this is a fact. So they are supporting a claim with this fact by telling us about something they read on a study. Okay, so a recent study has some surprising news. Kids in the United States between the ages of 8 and 18 spend 7.5 hours a day on electronic devices. These include computers, smartphones, and video games. Now, something really interesting happens towards the end, because in this part, the author talks about kids using electronic and being a good thing. And then as we continue in this paragraph, it says here that is the opposite. Some adults try to advance the idea that these devices waste kids' time. Okay, so this right here that is telling us the opposite of what the author believes, this is called a counter claim. And we are going to go ahead and underline this sentence because a counterclaim is the opposite of the author's claim. So the opposite of what the author is trying to convince you of. And then after the counterclaim, they used facts to refute this idea. So they started explaining how, however, some research, so here's the word research. We know that when authors use this, it's coming from a fact. Research survey says this idea is inaccurate. In fact, the data shows another key word that points out to a fact that technology can benefit kids. So going back to the counterclaim, this is what the opposite of what the author believes. And here we're going to go ahead and answer this question. How does the author use a fact against this opposite claim? And here we can see that the author used some research survey that say that this is inaccurate. So we're going to go ahead and write that. The author says that some research survey say this idea is inaccurate. Okay. All right. Remember that you can pause this video at any time if you need more time to copy. All right. We're going to go ahead to paragraphs 2, 3, and 4 because we are trying to find if the author's claim or belief about electronic is that it's a good thing for kids. So let's continue. Paragraph 2. Critic says that the kids who stare at computers and TV all day do not get enough exercise. The fact stands in counterpoint to this belief. One study compared kids who use media a lot to those who do not. The heavy media users actually spend more time in physical activity than light media users. So we're going to go ahead and also do a stop and think here to analyze what the author is trying to tell us. So at the beginning, the author started by telling us that critics, so the word critic means someone that is opposing to electronics, someone that don't want kids to use electronic. They're saying that kids who use electronics, such as computers and TV, they do not get enough exercise. And then here, the author went ahead and refute that idea by stating the word of fact. So anytime that they are trying to say something negative about electronics, the author included a fact that shows the opposite. So here, that fact that the author is trying to use to convince us that electronics are good is that one study compared kids who use media a lot to those who don't. The heavy media users actually spend more time in physical activities than light media users. Here the word heavy doesn't mean amount, instead means kids that spend more time using electronic, and light is referring to kids that spend less time. Okay, and basically it started by telling us that kids do not get exercise, the kids that use a lot of electronics, but based on a study it's telling us the opposite. So this is one way the author is trying to use an opposing claim to convince us that electronic devices are good for kids. Moving on to paragraph 3. One study by the National Institute of Health says that action video games may help increase kids' visual attention. In addition, using interactive media can give kids good structure for learning. It can also help them learn to switch tasks effectively. Kids also need to use the web to access information. Many argue that learning to use the web responsibly sharpens kids' reasoning abilities. We're going to go ahead and stop and think about what this author is trying to tell us here. So again, he used the word study, which when an author uses that is because they are going to tell us another fact that supports their claim. Here it says that, and here they gave us the actual name of the institution that does this study. So this makes this fact even stronger, that the National Institute of Health says that action video games may help increase kids' visual attention. So this right here is a fact that supports the claim about electronics being good for kids. Then the author continued to give more positive facts to tell us that media, goes back to electronic devices, give kids good structuring for learning. And they added that it can help them learn to switch tasks effectively. Kids also need to use the web to access information. So this whole entire paragraph is telling us that it's supporting the claim that kids need to spend time using electronic devices. Okay. All right, moving on to the last paragraph, paragraph 4. Today's world is wired, and not just for fun. The jobs of the future depends on kids who plugged in. So here the author ended with a positive statement relating to kids needing to spend time using electronic devices. So which text evidence about visual attention supports the author's claim? So to do that, you want to make sure you want to reread the text to be sure you understand how the author cites visual attention to support that claim. So right here we see that the author is mentioning a study by the National Institute of Health saying that action video games may help increase kids' attention. That clearly supports the claim. Let's go ahead and let's answer the reread, which is our reading strategy. It says to draw a box around the supporting evidence about visual attention that supports the author's claim. And when we reread paragraph 3, the evidence or the fact that the author uses to tell us to support his claim is this first sentence here. So we're going to go ahead and draw a box around this sentence. Okay? Because this is the fact that the author uses to tell us about increasing kids' visuals attention. All right? Then we're going to go over here down to this table that we have. So in a table, we have a title, we have a description, we have, these are the bars that shows the number, and then we also have the titles that tells us more information about what each bar means. So if we look closely, the title here, it says a source of news for teens. The description states, for the latest news, teens used to rely on newspaper, television, and magazines. See how many teens now get their news online. And here we see that all online teens between the ages of 12 and 17, 62% get their news online. Younger teens, 12 and 13, 49% of them get their news online. And older teens, 14 and 17, 68%. So based on this, the older the teens are, the more information they get online. And when you add these two, from 12 to 17, more than half of teens are getting their source from online. So why did the author included the sidebar graph, a source of news for teen? So an author would do this because it's supporting their claim. So we're going to go ahead and write that here. Author uses a sidebar or a bar graph to support his claim about electronic devices. Okay. Over here. All right. And then the last thing I want to point out here is on paragraph 2. So here it's telling us, let me see. Okay, right here on this first sentence. Critics says that kids who stare at computers and TVs all day do not get enough exercises. Okay? Now, most kids do not really use a computer or TV all day. So this is an exaggeration or an overstatement. And authors sometimes use exaggerations to make a point. In the author's opinion, do these kids use technology too little or too much? So because they state it all day, we can assume that the author is referring that the kids are using it too much. And that the critics say that kids who use computer and TVs for many hours do not get enough exercise. So the most important thing here I want to point out of how the author is exaggerating to make his point across. So now we're going to go back to this question. Circle the author's claim about the electronic devices. Based on the facts that we read, now we can be sure that the author's opinion about electronic devices in this section plugged in is kids need to spend time using electronic devices. So you can go ahead, highlight this or box this. We are going to move on to the next page on page 66. And what we're going to do on this page is the same that we did on the last section of it. So we're still focusing on author's claim. And remember, an author's claim is the author's opinion about a topic supported by facts. And facts is what convinces us to believe, to share the same opinion as the author. So as we are reading page 66 and 67, you want to keep in mind what is the author's stance on electronic devices. And sometimes just by reading the heading, it gives us a clue. So over here, the author used the heading tuned out. And right below, it's telling us electronic media is harming kids. So that is, looking at headings can also play a big role in determining the author's claim. Before we go ahead and we circle an author's claim, we want to make sure that we are looking at the facts. because looking at the facts helps us understand what is the author's claim. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to read Tuned Out. Okay. Are kids tuning out by tuning in to electronic devices? An alarming report states that electronic media use has continued to grow over the past decade, aided by the increase in mobile phone use among teenagers. About 25% of teenagers consider themselves constantly connected to the internet. Nearly 6 out of 10 kids get their first cell phone between the ages of 10 and 11. Are these devices harmful or hurtful to the well-being of young people? A close analysis of several studies shows that there are plenty of disadvantages to these devices. Okay, so here the author is using strong language to tell us about their opinion, such as the word disadvantage. So I want us to take a closer look at this word. Disadvantage has the prefix dis and the root word is advantage. The prefix dis, as we learned yesterday, its meaning is not. And the word advantage and the word advantage means something that is good, something that you take, something that is good. So the meaning of disadvantage is not, it will be the opposite of what advantage is. So here it's telling us that studies are showing that these devices are not helpful for kids. So this is giving us a clue to determine if the author's claim in this section is if electronic media is harming kids. And the facts that the author is trying to use here is, and we can point it out because the author used the word studies. Now the author is going to go ahead and tell us more about those studies, which includes the fact. So let's continue to read. The internet's supposed to be a great tool for learning. Do kids who love computers do better in the classroom? To cite one report, okay, here's a key word. That means that the author is going to go ahead and give us a fact. To cite one report, access to electronic devices does not automatically bring high marks in school. See the graphs below. Okay, when authors use graphs, that's another type of information that authors use to get their point across. This is how they are supporting their claims with facts. So let's go ahead and let's look at this pie graph. And this is called a pie graph because here we don't have bars anymore. We have circles and they look like pies. So we call this a pie graph. A pie graph, just like a bar graph, is going to have a title, a description, and is going to give us information about the numbers that we are looking at. Okay, so it says here, draw a box around the pie graph that shows the lowest percentage of good grades. So anytime you see a graph, any type of graph in the text, you want to go ahead and you want to read it to see how it supports the author's claim. The effect of media use on grades. So here we have effect, very important. It's going to tell us people that use electronics, how is it affecting them. So these pie graphs shows how the use of media affects grades. Here we see moderate media users. These are people that use electronic, not as much, not too little, but not too much. 65% is good grade. 31% of these students are fair and poor grades, or like C students, and 3% schools don't use grades. Here we have heavy media users. These are kids that use a lot of electronic devices. So 51% of them use good grades, and 47% of them have fair and poor grades. Then we have light media users. These are kids that don't use a lot of electronic devices. And according to this pie graph, it's telling us that 60% have good grades, 23% has fair grades, and 10% school doesn't use grades. So which of these pie graphs shows the lowest percentage of good grades? So here we are looking at this part. And based on these three numbers, heavy media users have the lowest percentage of good grades. Okay? So here the author is supporting his claim by telling us that kids that use a lot of electronics have the lowest good grades. Okay? Right? So then the last question. What conclusion can you draw about media use? So this is not asking you about how you feel about electronics, but instead, based on the information the author has given us, what conclusions we can draw about media. And based on this, we can tell that people who use a lot of electronics don't have as better grades like the ones light and moderate users have. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and write that. So here we can write that, and here we've noticed something, that who has better grades? Light media users, heavy media users, or moderate users? And actually is the moderate media users. So this is telling us that the kids that use too little of it or use too much actually have lower grades, and kids that use moderate use seem to have the best grades. So we can write that. Moderate users seems to have the best grades. Okay. Now, based on these two paragraphs that we have just read, let's go ahead and let's think about the author's claim. What is the author's opinion about electronics? So at the beginning we said that electronic media is harming kids. But looking at the facts, do the facts support this author's opinion? Yes, it does. It tells us over here how electronic devices are not helping students score higher grades. They also use strong language here, disadvantage. So here they're telling us that studies are showing that devices are not helping out kids. So we can go ahead and underline, because now we have confirmed that the author's claim on this second heading is electronic media is harming kids. So we can go ahead and answer this question. What is the author's argument in the second paragraph? So now we're here. So here, this is supporting this, which supports our claim. So we can go ahead and write that access to electronic devices does not mean you get high grades. Okay? And remember that you can pause this video at any time to give you time to copy. And our last question is, how does the author support his or her argument? So based on these two paragraphs, the author is using studies, they're citing report, and they are using a pie graph. So we can put citing studies, reports, and pie graphs. So we're going to go ahead and continue to our last page, page 67. So this is continuing tuned out. Some argue that the devices get kids involved and help them make friends. Claims like these are incorrect. A study, so here we know, they're stating a fact, done by the Pew Research Center discusses teenagers' use of online social networks. Teens use social media to keep in touch with friends they already have, not to make new ones. In addition, trying to meet people online can be dangerous. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do a stop and think. What is the author telling us there? So here, the author is, here's the key word, some argue. Okay, so this here, the author is telling us their counterpoint or their counterclaim, which remember, it's the opposite of what they believe. In this section, they believe that electronics are not good for kids. So their counterpoint is going to be that electronics is good. So they're trying to convince you by telling you, by mentioning, like, even though some people say that it is good, then they are refuting it by stating that claims like these are incorrect. And then they go ahead and tell us a fact that shows why is incorrect. And their fact is strong because they mentioned the name of a center. So we know that is a reliable source. Okay, let's go ahead and continue to the next paragraph. There are other serious drawbacks to new technology. Here we're using strong language to support the author's claim. One issue is multitasking. We're trying to do many tasks at the same time. Is it possible to do more than one task at a time well? Some studies say kids' thinking improves when they do several tasks at once. Still, experts point out, keyword to tell us another fact, that much more research needs to be done on this. New electronic devices hit stores every year. Kids should know that there is more to life than what they see on a screen. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and stop and think. We're going to think about who or what is this are these two paragraphs about. So definitely is about technology. And here they are continuing to maintain their opinion or the claim that electronics are not good for kids. Okay, and here's how they finish this paragraph. Kids should know that there is more to life than what they see on a screen. That continues to support the author's claim. Also, they mentioned about drawbacks. So drawbacks are things that are negative, things that are not helping kids with technology. And they mentioned that one of the issues is multitasking. Okay, now I want us to go ahead and look at over here. So we're going to start here in this question since we're talking about author's claim. So underline the author's argument in the last paragraph. Who is the intended audience for this text? Okay, so the author's argument in the last paragraph is this sentence. Kids should know that there is more to life than what they see on screen. Based on this sentence, who do you think the author is writing this for? If they're mentioning kids, we have to think about who are the people that deal with kids on an everyday basis. And that could be parents. So we're going to go ahead, parents. So this is a great article for parents to have more information. Also, teachers deals with kids. And we can also add students, people like you, because you're getting more information about things that affect you. Right? Now let's go over here to the second question. The read. So this is the strategy that we are working on. So let's take a closer look at paragraph 2. We're going to draw a box around what experts think about multitasking. Okay, so what do they think about multitasking? So here we have the word multitasking, and I want to point out that the word multitasking, we're going to go ahead and box multi, which is one of our root words, and multi refers to many. Even though the author gave us the definition, I still want you to remember about those Greek and Latin root words as you see them. Okay, so multitasking is the act to do many tasks at the same time. So they're asking us, what is the author's opinion about multitasking? Okay, so it tells us, it starts out, is it possible? So the author here is talking to us, like, do you think it's possible to do more than one thing at a time? Then it continues to tell us that some study says kids thinking improves. Okay, so you might be a little bit confused because you'll be like, wait, I thought you were against technology. But here they actually mention something positive about it. But if we continue to read the next sentence, and this is here where we really see what the experts think about. Still, experts point out that much more research needs to be done on this. That means that they don't really know if technology really helps with the issue of multitasking. They need to go ahead and do more research on it. So it's not yes it helps, and it's not no it doesn't help. There's not enough studies being done in order to come up with an answer. Okay, and then we're going to go back to the first question, which talks about Greek and Latin prefixes. The prefix in sometimes means not. What does the word incorrect mean? So if this means not, then the answer for this will be, the meaning of incorrect will be not correct. And if something is not correct, then we say that that is wrong. Okay? And our last question here. How does the author address and refute any counter argument? Okay, so the author here, remember that a counter argument is the opposite belief. So that it goes against what they believe in. And over here, and we see it here, they started saying about the issue of multitasking. So they are citing experts, so we can put they are using experts, they're quoting them, they're citing experts, what the experts say. And also if we go back to page 66, they are using a bar graphs or a pie graph. To refute, and refute means it's like, even though people are saying, oh, technology is good, they are still sticking to their opinion, saying that No, it is electronic is not good for us. So this section of the text that talks about how technology is bad is actually the counterpoint, and it tells us right here. Remember that counterpoint means the opposite belief or the opposite claim. Okay? All right, so this ends this lesson over here for our share read. Remember, you can always go back if you need more time or pause the video. Now, in addition to this, we're going to go ahead. After you're done reading this, you can put your purple book away. I'm going to go ahead and show you the work that you're going to be completing today for grammar. All right?